Okay, hi folks. Steven here. So, this is yet another in our continuing series. We're in between the sixth and seventh generation of our Pokemon side game music discussions. So, we did a couple months ago, we did a discussion of the music of several non Pokemon Game Freak games, picked out a bunch of tracks there. Today is going to be, let's see, it's going to be discussing the music of Super Smash Bros. For 3DS and Wii U. Sorry, looking at like 5 different screens here. I have a little bit of a different visual setup than usual. For some reason, my webcam does not interface correctly with StreamYard, our provider here, and thus I've had to use the camera that I typically use for filming on location, as well as a cam link from Elgato. Not sponsored, but and that's connected to my computer as if it were a webcam, is what the purpose of it kind of was. So it is, technically speaking, I suppose, a better.
If it works, it works.
I suppose. I think the problem is the webcam is coming across as an imaging device rather than a webcam. So that's bizarre. And why don't you tell us what you've been up to lately?
Yeah, so Pikapi Podcast has dropped, finally, Movie 7. So prepare to get nostalgic with old monster movies and aliens attacking the city. And my new rabbit hole for the day is what constitutes the Pokemon language. So if anyone wants to get in on that discussion, please listen to that episode and then come at me with your theories on whether or not Deoxys is a Pokemon and how communication works.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting release. This was the last of the Miramax movies, and
Yes.
it has, well, the 5.7 Blu-ray of that era of movies with heroes, and this one is sought after in part because it has that scene with all the little cubes, the thousands and thousands, or however. Obviously, it was all done by CGI and stuff, piled up across the city, and it really messes with the video compression on there.
I love it.
That and the 5.7 Blu-ray has, I guess, the most data packed in there for the video feed. But yes, today's actual discussion will be on the music of Super Smash Bros. For 3DS and Wii U, otherwise known as Smash 4 colloquially, but I believe the official title is for the two games combined is Super Smash Bros. For 3DS and Wii U. 1 second here, I realize I gotta get the notes up because I rebooted my computer. But otherwise, we've done 2 previous Smash Bros. One was a combined one for 64 and Melee. Did another one a couple years ago for Brawl. And eventually we'll do one for Ultimate, and we'll see where things go. Nintendo has sort of confirmed the Switch 2, but not told us a whole lot about it besides showing some renders and whatnot. They finally had to go and do that a couple days ago. Unfortunately, the only thing we saw was some footage of the next Mario Kart game, which is a big deal. But I think from a specs perspective, they didn't really tell us too much. I think one rumor is that the Joy-Cons on the Switch 2 will be able to function as sort of a mouse with an optical sensor on there, which would be a big thing for potentially, an art game or for the next Mario Maker. I'm sure there's a Mario Maker 3 in development, or at least in planning. Or I'm sure Nintendo will come up with some other idea. They're always pretty good about that, so counting on them to come up with something we haven't thought of. But other than that, let's see. But, so yeah. So we'll be doing a quick little thing here. Let's see, anything else before we get into our main discussion? I think we're about ready for that.
I think we're ready.
All right, so let's see.
Oh,
There
shoot.
we go. Give it a second.
Start.
This time, make sure everything's started.
Yep, we're good. We're good.
Hi, folks. Steven here. I'm on the phone with Anne from Pikapi Podcast. And in part 2 of our break between the 6th and 7th generations of Pokemon side games, we're going to be discussing the music of definitely a Pokemon adjacent thing. This is sorry. And in part 2, I guess, of our break between Gen 6 and Gen 7 of Pokemon side games, we're doing another pit stop here. We're going to talk about the music of Super Smash Bros. For 3DS and Wii U. Now, of course, these came out actually about a little over 10 years ago from when we're recording this, believe it or not. It's been that long. And, I guess because of the dual nature, we'll talk more in our game discussion about some of the concessions, I guess, they kind of had to make, but also some opportunities with these entries. But just to get the dates down, get my notes up. There's the mouse cursor. But just to get the dates down, the 3DS version did come out first. Came out in Japan on September 13th, 2014. North America and the EU got it on October 3rd, 2014. And then Australia got it a day later. It might just be a time zone difference there. Now, the Wii U version came out in November/early December, and the order is kind of reversed. North America got it on the 21st of November, 2014. The EU got it on the 28th. Australia got it on the 29th. And then Japan had to wait all the way till December 6th, 2014. So they had to wait about 2 weeks from the American release date, which was kind of interesting. So kind of reversed there. It was kind of interesting for me because earlier that year I had been to Japan and I had a Japanese 3DS. So there were folks who were trying to get like a North American demo code for it, and I had the full game by then. And yeah, I know whatever the opposite of a first world opportunity or something like that. But that was a neat thing there. Of course, I was playing the game in Japanese, so I got to use Lizardon in there. And what do you remember about the lead up to this version?
At some point, all the smashes start to blur together for me, but I don't think this is the first one with Sonic. I think that was Brawl, but I remember that one of my friends, as it was leading up to this, was like, in the Mario versus Sonic war, he is Team Sonic. So he was talking my ear off about like maybe they'll add Knuckles and like maybe they'll add this person and this person. So I remember there was like a lot of talk about the roster overall and just all the new characters they're adding and like, can you actually fight as your Miis this time? Because that's a thing we've all been wanting to do. And, which Pokemon are they going to add? All that kind of thing. So I remember the roster being the big thing.
It always is.
Yeah, right.
And we'll have some definite additions and returns, actually, and non-returns to talk about when we get to our game discussion afterwards. Mm-hmm. One other thing I want to mention is back in, E3 was still a thing back then, and during the Wii U cycle, Best Buy did, for 3 years in there, it must have been 2013, 2014, and 2015, they did a special tie-in event at a couple dozen stores across the country here in the U.S., and I was very lucky. One of those was right here in Madison. Didn't have to go to Milwaukee or Chicago, although they had events too. So you got to see a sort of a pre-release version of the game with most of the base characters in there, and our place wasn't as crowded as some of the other locations. As you can imagine, this was a big deal. People getting to play Smash Brothers, ahead of its actual release in a few months. And some people got to play, it was primarily the Wii U version, but they did have some 3DS demos going around while people were waiting in line. But some of them got to go through multiple times. So, but there was a lot of, when some of the new characters' final smashes and whatnot came up, there was some big cheering there. So that was a fun little thing, 3 or 4 months ahead of time. So, yeah, a lot of anticipation for this. Of course, with the Wii U, there was sort of the thing, well, will this save the Wii U? And I think at that point, there wasn't anything that could truly make it a success, but it did help it for sure. All right. Well, as far as the corporate organizations involved, you may remember that the first two Smash Brothers games, N64 and Melee, those were done by HAL. And then Brawl had a little bit of a different thing where there was sort of an ad hoc Smash team set up. So this and Ultimate comes, obviously a fair bit after, were done by Namco Bandai, or Bandai Namco, I think it is, and Project Sora, which is, now the Sakurai's outfit, I guess it is. He had done a few things in the interim as well that sort of figure into this. But that's going to be kind of important because actually some of the folks we're going to be mentioning today have worked on other Pokemon stuff, notably Pokken Tournament that we discussed a few sometime last year. But as far as an overall style, we usually try to do that. Smash Brothers is, there is sort of a field of play. There are certain types of songs you probably wouldn't get in a Smash Brothers game. But especially since Brawl, where they really expanded stuff, both in terms of the number of tracks and the variety, there isn't a super firm style, but obviously there tends to be a lot of energetic music, which is typical for a fighting video game.
I would say for all the remixes for this game, or maybe just the ones we picked, there is a bit of a through line that I can see at least.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
So just like a side game discussion, each of us, me and Ann, have picked out 3 songs. We each picked out 2 Pokemon songs and 1 non-Pokemon song. And we did stick to stuff that was introduced in this generation and is also not like a direct rip from the games, as they sometimes do, especially with some of the newer titles. Not that that's necessarily bad, but not as interesting to discuss. Let's see. I picked Route 10 from Pokemon Black and White. In's Castle from Pokemon Black and White, and Gerudo Valley, a remix of the theme of the same name from Ocarina of Time. Anne, what did you pick out here?
I picked Route 23 and Battle Team Flare, and then Yoshi's Woolly World remix.
Yeah, there's going to be some definite interesting things or whatever to say about some of these and where they were in position. You probably noticed that our Pokemon stuff all comes from Gen 5 and X and Y. Not all of Gen 6 was out by the time this came out. And Yoshi's Woolly World will have a little bit of a note there as well. But in any case, let's go ahead. We'll start on my side. This is Route 23 from Black and White. So Route 23 in the Unova region got a remix here. Oh, I'm sorry. Route 10. I'm sorry. It was the first one. Route 23 is Anne's. I'm sorry.
You're good.
Let me restate mine just to be safe here.
Yeah, Unova.
So I picked Route 10 from Pokemon Black and White, In's Castle from Pokemon Black and White, and a remix of Gerudo Valley from Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time that was added in this 4th iteration of Smash Brothers. But in any case, let's go to my first pick. This is Route 10 from Pokemon Black and White. And this remix, it lists a supervisor for each of these tracks here. If they have like vocalists and stuff like that, you can get some extra information. Almost all of these tracks that are in this game, by the way, are also available in the Ultimate Sound Test. So if you need to look them up there, you totally can for at least all the ones we picked. But the person who managed or supervised this particular rearrangement was Yoko Shimomura, who I think is probably a known entity to most of our audience, but just in case. So yeah, other than maybe Koji Kondo from Nintendo, she is probably one of the biggest video game composers of all time. Some of her best known works include most of the music for Street Fighter II, including Guile's theme, the iconic theme that fits all, as well as a number of RPGs, many of them Mario-related, but also the Kingdom Hearts series of games, which are sort of an action RPG type of deal, I guess. I need to try those out sometime.
They're amazing. I cry.
Yeah. So I think the most recent thing she worked on that I can think of, she wasn't able, unfortunately, to work on the new Mario and Luigi game, probably because she was so busy with the remake of Super Mario RPG that came out in 2023. So, but I'm sure we'll hear more from her as time goes on. But yeah, absolutely a legend. You have almost certainly. She's also she worked at Capcom for a number of years, and I think helped out with a couple of the Mega Man games and so on and so forth. So she is one of the big ones in there. Anything you wanted to add, Anne?
I love, yeah. Like, I'm sure everybody here, even if you don't know her, you know her work. So, name.
Yeah, one second where I zoom in on my notes here. That's better. Let's see. As far as this remix, honestly, I think, I mean, there's a pretty good diversity of music in Generation 5 in the Unova region. It does represent, the map is based on New York City, but the region is based on basically the mainland U.S. So there's pretty good diversity here. But I feel like she kind of took it, and I guess her team or whatever, it's an accordion and strings. It almost kind of makes it feel like an XY, like a French track, but not really. I don't know. Anne, what were your kind of thoughts on this one?
Well, yeah, like I heard the guitar noodling and the accordion and a violin, and I was like, okay, yeah, this is Pokemon the fifth movie. Let's go, Altamar. Like, but it was so reminiscent of that. Yeah, like, there's a lot of tracks on this album that kind of have a guitar, violin, like, I don't know how to describe it, but they have a vibe that is very similar, and use that a lot of stringed instrumentation, a lot of, like, I don't know, of the people. Like, it feels very like folksy, but not in the way America uses folksy. But like I don't know, there are some tracks that sound like we're on a trip to Mexico. There are some that's like we're just walking through Europe. But like they're instruments that the people would have: violins, guitars, accordions. Like, a lot of these remixes seem they're not using lofty, complicated instruments. It's ones that farmers would pull out and play, if that makes sense.
A little bit. Like I said, there is a fair amount of diversity, even just within the new music in Smash 4. But one thing I noticed is this has definitely a flowing quality, which I think is largely carried over from the from the actual game track in black and white. And, fighting game music can kind of work either way. You can have a smooth flow or you can have something more choppy. Those can technically both work in a fighting game, but I kind of just wanted to mention that. Any other aspects of this you wanted to call out, Anne?
No, I really like I said, the vibe. It feels very Pokemon in a way that I think none of us were expecting.
All right. Well, another Route theme got a treatment here. Anne, can you tell us a little bit about the arrangement of Route 23?
Yeah, so this is something completely different, because this one gets the orchestral treatment. So it goes from kind of the lowbrow of the people that I was trying and failing to describe, and this one gets like, this is the elite, this is the concert hall, because it's got just all the instruments of the orchestra. I used to play trombone, so all I hear is the horns, but there's a string section, there's a woodwind section, there's beautiful timpani. It builds really triumphantly, and then there's a section where like all the bass instruments cut out, and then it kind of builds again, and then it gets more battle-y. So it kind of goes from different places: triumphant, gentle, fight song. So it's got a lot of movement to it.
Yeah, I said it had kind of an off to adventure quality. I did kind of look where Route 23 is in the game, and turns out it's actually right before the Pokemon League in there, which will definitely follow into my second pick in a little bit. So if you're curious what type of area from the game it is, it's from there, right? So I guess it also kind of represents maybe the final stretch. Although if you've played Black and White, there's a fair bit to go once you do get to the league. It's quite packed in there. A little more dense maybe than some other Pokemon games is Elite Four areas. But Anne, anything else you wanted to mention on this one?
I like the contrast because they're both from the same game. They're two different routes in the same game, but like they're very different, not just in their melodies, but like the way they chose to, I don't know, orchestrate them.
Yeah, and I guess the one other thing we should definitely mention here, this one was arranged or supervised by Yuka Sugiyoko. I hope I got that about right. Someone we've actually already talked about because she's actually been at Nintendo since like the late 80s, early 90s, apparently. But we've talked about her because she did some of the work on Pokemon Picross's music. But her stuff goes all the way back to like the Super Nintendo, at least in there, as well as a bunch of stuff from Fire Emblem and Paper Mario. So definitely you can check those out. All right, well, let's go on to my second pick. This is In's Castle, of course, talking about how Generation 5 has a very non-standard Elite Four and Champion arc, I guess you could say, once you get to that point. This was done by Shoto Kageyama, who is a very regular figure who worked on many of the main series Pokemon games as well. I forget exactly where he is now. I think they do bring him in every so often for various things. So certainly not a stranger to the material. And stylistically, I mean, it starts off with a music box, a sort of off-key, or I don't know about Demented, but a few notes of that, and then it goes into a sort of, of course, the Inn's Castle theme, which is an orchestral rock arrangement. It's kind of interesting, because remember, 5 was the last generation of games that were on the DS. And so the sound hardware going from that to even the 3DS is quite a jump. And what did you notice about this particular track?
I loved how it opened, like, and my beautiful creepy boy. I love that opening with the music box so much, and then like it goes full Castlevania with the rock and the orchestra. I really love this track because like N's whole deal is he's a little negative. He usually speaks in like the negative versions of sentences. And then he very much likes a binary view of the world. He wants everything to be black and white, easily boxed. You know, Pokemon are this and people are that. And then this track goes so many places. It is so nuanced. It is sad and lonely, and it's sweet, and it's a little dangerous and unsettling. And as you say, demented and creepy at one point. There's a moment where he gets a little triumphant, and there's a bit of a like little key change within the melody, and then back to normal. Like, so it's like, I don't know. There's a lot. This music is saying a lot of things about N and where he is and how he views the world. And that's very beautiful, and that's very well done.
The other adjective I came up with this, or verb, I guess, is imposing. And that kind of makes sense considering, if I remember correctly in the game, like the castle like juts out of the ground and like stuff like that. Kind of obviously one of those things you can really only get away with in like a video game or certain types of fantasy and stuff like that.
Yeah, OSHA would not.
And I think the song does that very well. So pretty well handled there. With that said, let's go ahead and move on, Anne, to your second pick. This is the Team Flare Battle rearrangement. First of all, who was kind of behind this?
Oh, shoot, I have to pull that tab.
Well, don't worry. I have it in my notes.
Oh, thank you.
And it's someone we've already talked about. This is Motoi Sakuraba. In fact, we've talked about him during our Brawl episode because for that iteration, he did an arrangement of the Victory Road theme from Ruby and Sapphire. And he's back to take the reins on this Team Flare battle arrangement. Anne, what kind of caught your attention with this one?
Well, Team Flare loves to be dramatic. And one thing I noticed about this track is there are points where like the melody of the traditional battle thing we're used to almost seems to take a back seat to like the rhythm of this thing and just like the chords that are driving it. And there's even a moment in the track where like I feel like the chords that usually go with the melody, like, are changed a little bit to give it like a slightly more positive feel at one point. It's very interesting. But this, yeah, it's a very dramatic song. It's full of synth and electric guitar, like super fast up and down scales. The sections where, like I said, the traditional melody seems to almost be buried underneath all of the accoutrement and the arrangement. And yeah, there's something about that kind of like with Enn's Castle that seems to be communicating things about the story through the music to me. Like it seems very deliberate.
1 second here. Just wanted to share a comment from someone in our audience while we're talking about this. I think this is more about a song or two back, but yes, DDD033 dropped by and says, I love N. I think he means the character, not just the letter, but all the same, always like to toss those in there. Remember, you can always join in when we record these live. Otherwise, you can always just give us a comment or drop us an email. More info on that later.
I agree with you. N is perfect. He's a stalwart, zealous boy who changes his worldview and adapts to new information. He's a role model we should all look up to.
But, as far as the instrumentation, there's a lot of synth instruments and guitar, kind of a synth. I don't know if it's quite an orchestra. There's certainly a thing there. I do always want to say one thing. This is only really probably works in English, but flair, it's spelled Flare, but I can't help but think that they are also making a bit of a pun, at least in English, on FLAIR because of how snappy those folks like to dress. I think that is somewhat intentional there. But this one, I don't think it's quite as out there as maybe Victory Road from Brawl that he also did. But I can see what would attract him here. Anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, like I agree. Like it is not quite what I expected it to be when I first thought. I first thought that this is going to be so wild. I was actually surprised a little bit by, like I said, some of the subtleties that the music was doing. It was a little less bombastic than I was expecting, but very interesting nonetheless.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, we each did also pick one non-Pokemon song. I picked Gerudo Valley Remix. Now, just to clarify here, in Brawl, they have the original version of the song from Ocarina of Time, the N64, first N64 Zelda game. Here they added a remix of it. And let's see, this is credited to Ryo Hamamoto, who has worked on Tekken, the Idol Match series, and a little game called Pokken Tournament. So a lot of familiar people in this one, I will say. Not terribly surprising, I suppose, with Bandai Namco getting involved in the development of this iteration. So not surprising some folks would cross over between the two games that were produced around the same time. But, the one in Ocarina of Time is pretty good. But this one, this is another case of me picking a track that I have used in my pre-recorded radio show from 8 to 64. This one really kicks it up and turns it into not that the other one wasn't a song, but sort of like a more of a radio-ish thing. I don't know how exactly to say it, but it goes hardcore into Latin dance type stuff with guitar. There's a knocking sound. And I assume this one caught your attention even though you didn't pick it.
Oh, it sure did. Like, this is the one where I was like, it feels like we're going to Mexico. Like, I feel like we're just chilling in a border town and, like, we just did a hard day's work and now we're hanging out at the local, whatever the local hangout joint is, and someone pulls out a guitar and starts noodling, like, and there's this beautiful percussion and, like clapping percussion and, like, wood blocks or castanet kind of things, like, again, like instruments that people would just have in daily life, and a flute at one point. Oh, this is such a wild and beautiful arrangement, and I love it.
Yeah, and I think not unlike Sticker Brush Symphony / Bramble Blast from Brawl, or the Zelda 2 Temple theme and the way that was rearranged in Melee. I think this is another one of those cases. It's probably not as dramatic as those two, I suppose, but it's sort of elevated, taken an existing well-liked or loved video game theme and sort of given it a new life and stuff like that. Because I think, I'm sure some folks are partial to the N64 original version, but this version of it really, I think, gave it a lot more exposure, and it's one of the reasons it's so well remembered from this one. So definitely one to check out. All right, well, Anne, you've got kind of an interesting pick here. So this is Yoshi's Woolly World, and it's a little weird because I think when this was announced, and I think maybe when this game released, I forget exactly. Yoshi's Woolly World, I think it was sort of pseudo-announced through this game, one way or another. At least when they showed the stage and stuff like that, because I know it came out either around this time of this or in early 2015 or something like that. It was.
Yeah, I don't think I realized it was a real game until this brawl came out.
Yeah, so as a result, they actually have it's kind of one song. They have the in-game version as well as this remix version. And first off, who is behind this remix?
Yeah, so we have Misaki Asada and Kazumi Tokata. From what I can tell, it looks like Kazumi Tokata probably did the main theme, and maybe some other tracks, and they collaborated. Kazumi Tokata also does Yoshi's voice, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so one second here. One second here, Anna, wind up a bit. I was asking who did the stuff for the remix, not the original version. It is not... Yep. Sorry about the folks at home with little Anne's distortion there, but yeah, sorry. But yeah, go ahead and let's start that again then. All right, so Anne, tell us a little bit about this particular remix and who is behind it.
Yeah, well, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it is also Yoko Shimomura working on this remix. If I
not according to the records I have, I looked this up today. I looked this up today in Smash Ultimate. It says it's Taku Inoue, who is a person.
Somewhere.
Yep, who works on Tekken. Oh, and also Pokken. So we've probably talked about them before as well. So not a big surprise there. Shimomura did do a couple other things. Notably, there's an Earthbound remix, and of course, since they brought since they brought Ryu into this game, she worked on some of the Street Fighter stuff there. But as far as this Yoshi World remix, I guess like I said, it was kind of new with the game theme because, like I said, I think we got a taste of this before the actual Yoshi's Woolly World game came out. Sorry, this is kind of awkward, folks, to sort of describe. I should have looked up Yoshi's Woolly World release date in here, see if that was late 2014 or if that was early 2015 or something else. But regardless of the sequencing, tell us a little bit about, I guess, the original and this remix, since they were sort of given to us at the same time in the same place.
Yeah, well, for starters, I'm going to tell you, I like this remix way better. The original kind of has, like, it's a cute little melody. It's kind of some cute synths and like flutes and like kind of it feels very what you would expect from a Yoshi game. But then this remix, like, there's so much bass and it's got like, it's the same melody, but it's a folky jam and it feels wholesome. There's guitar noodling. There's a slide whistle. Like it feels like a lot of synths or struck instruments kind of mixed in with them. So it all feels very unsophisticated, but charming. And like, it's got a groove to it. In a way that I feel like the original, it's the same melody, yes, but it like the instrumentation is such that it doesn't have that same groove and it doesn't have that same rhythm. And the instruments just kind of feel a little too video gamey. Like it's nice, but like this remix just takes it to a different level.
So I guess I get to be the Debbie Downer here because I actually prefer the regular version to the remix. I think the remix is a little too out there. It's kind of weird when you get two versions of the song straight at the same time and outside of maybe like a radio single or something like that. This was a kind of unusual arrangement of using Smash Brothers to promote a game coming around the same time. I guess it kind of may accidentally or coincidentally happened with Melee and Fire Emblem, and having those characters in there. But this was one where they kind of made a cross-promotional deal, I guess you could say there. So I think I just like the more subdued arrangement of the bass version, which is also here in Smash Brothers. Not a horrible song or a horrible remix by any stretch of the imagination, but yeah. All right. Well,
No,
I think we should have. All right. Well, I think we should have a few honorable mentions. I did talk about this a little bit with. There's a Smash Brothers competitive group that comes in most Mondays at a store here in the Madison area that I often drop by. I talked to some of them about it. They mentioned some of the ones we did. There's that Magicant rearrangement that Yoko Shimomura did from the Earthbound series. That's also extremely good. Speaking of my pre-recorded radio show, in the latest episode, I ended up using the Smash Tour map theme, which is a variation on the Smash 4 overture, or whatever you want to call it there. Certainly some other picks there if we had more time with all of this. So a lot to check out there. Mm-hmm. That being said, I get the feeling, well, this is by no means a bad soundtrack. I do feel like the additions made in Brawl were, on the whole, more interesting than the additions made in this version. Not that there weren't some good ones. Another one I want to mention from Donkey Kong Country, there's a lot of stuff thanks to the Return series, but also some stuff based on it like Gear Getaway. But I feel like, I think Brawl maybe just hits you harder or something like that when you got to that, and you kind of knew here to expect more like that. I don't know. Anne, what were your thoughts?
Well, it's hard to say. I think I agree with you to a point. I feel like this soundtrack might have, just because there was so much, there's like hundreds and hundreds of tracks. Well, maybe not hundreds and hundreds. There is more than 100 tracks. And I feel like it really would have benefited from a singular vision for the entire thing if like every song was done in one particular style. And like I said, there is some through line I feel with some of the remixes. Like there is a lot of guitar noodling, acoustic noodling going on. But yeah, like I said, Route 10 and Route 23, completely different treatments. N, the instrumentation on N is completely different than the instrumentation in the Woolly World and Gerudo Valley. I think if they had gotten, I don't know, maybe one person in charge of everything and the vision was the same for every song, and it was just like, this is this game's version of that song, this game's remix of that song, and it, I don't know, would have, I think, helped.
To be honest, that's not really the direction I want them to go with the Smash Brothers soundtrack. Okay. I like the variety, especially when we get to Ultimate and there are like 70-some characters in that game.
True. True.
Like it's a like crossovers tend to be derided in movies and TV and stuff like that. Video games, they tend to work out quite well. I think there's a more of a suspension of disbelief in video games, I suppose, and you can get away with more. And I think the soundtrack should sort of do that. I mean, yes, the N64 one, that was all done by one person, and that's a little more narrow. But once you get to Melee, yeah, there's a lot of orchestral stuff, but there's also some other things. And I think, like there is some limits to what they can do as far as variety and stuff, and there is some identity there, but I like the fact that they can do all sorts of stuff and bring in all sorts of people, and I do not want them to implement your idea there ever.
Fair. That's why I don't make video games. I have a different skill set.
Yeah. So for a more regular video game, that makes maybe more sense. But fighting video games, just in general, because especially ones that take place all over the world, or in this case across multiple game worlds, in some sort of weird intersection space or whatever, I think you can get away with stuff like this, and I am all there for it. So, yeah, but I do think that, like I said, great additions in this one. Maybe not as impactful though as Brawl, but certainly not bad. Assuming we're recording this, we're recording this just a few days after the first teaser trailer for the Switch 2 comes out. There should almost certainly be a Smash Bros. There, and I'm expecting even more interesting stuff there with various things when they make a new Smash Brothers for the Switch 2 at some point, most likely. But if you thought we missed anything or anything like that, go ahead and give us a comment. You can always, first of all, you can always tune into one of these live. You can drop us an email, pokepress@gmail.com, or you can find me on social media. I'm on Blue Sky now, pokepress.bsky.com, or however those ones work there. And, you know, like I mentioned earlier, I went and talked to not only the Smash Bros. People, but also there's a couple Pokemon groups that meet at that store. And I did sort of poke their brains a little bit to see what else I could find. But if I'm at an event, you can always talk to me there, and I'll try and remember that. As far as feedback, I do have a fair bit of feedback here and there on various things. And it's always appreciated, but I didn't find anything I could really bring into a discussion. And did you have a question you wanted to ask or something like that, not related to our main discussion?
Not like, can I just go off?
Pretty much.
Okay, everybody. What makes Deoxys a Pokemon that came from space, not a Pokemon that came from space and continues to live and is reproduced on Earth and become acclimated and gone native as it is? What makes Deoxys a Pokemon? What makes anybody sure that Deoxys is a Pokemon as opposed to just any other creature? It's a big universe. Deoxys just showed up. Why is it a Pokemon? Doesn't even have a body. It is made of light.
Yeah, so in case you're not aware, Anne on her podcast just put out her big summary of the 7th movie, Destiny Deoxys. For what it's worth, earlier today at Pokemon League, there was a Defense Deoxys raid that spawned at our gym over at the store there. So I have a little bit of maybe thoughts on this. And of course, I guess the answer with all fictional universes is because that's how the creators decided it should work. But
no. It's like it shows up and everyone's like, oh my gosh, it's a Pokemon. How do you know? You have not tested it. You have not taken its vitals.
Yeah, for a series with a lot of scientists depicted in it, I guess that's a bit of a question mark. Being one of the only ones we know out there, but there was a definite space theming to, especially the 7th movie, but a little bit to the 6th movie, and also within.
Yeah.
Because you got, I can see the dang thing, Emerald, Rayquaza, that's the name I'm looking for, and the Space Center, and so on and so forth. So there was a whole thing of them looking outside of the Earth there. I'm not sure exactly what presented that, but yeah. Unfortunately, I guess I just don't have a question, but I guess if it goes into a Pokeball, I guess that counts for something.
Yeah, if you can catch it, it counts. Doesn't matter if it came out of Faba's wormhole. Doesn't matter if it came from space. Doesn't matter if we made it in a lab.
Yeah, so it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see where they go next, especially as we're still waiting for some news on Legend ZA and see what type of tweaks they make to the formula there, because I'm expecting some things there. Mm-hmm. But yeah, those are, you can ask. We do obviously we do obviously appreciate musical questions, but you can try and pick our brains. And if you happen to be lucky, we may discuss it in a future episode. Just a reminder, that's email is pokepress@gmail.com. Comment on one of these videos. Comment during one of our live streams. Meet me in person if you're fortunate enough. And, of course, on Blue Sky, I am at Pokepress. All right, so we're done with our interim episodes. You may remember that last time we did a discussion of music from other Game Freak games, non-Pokemon Game Freak games, of which they have made a decent number. But our next discussion will be the first Western-released Gen 7 side games. This is the Sun and Moon generation. Now, some things did have Sun and Moon stuff brought into them, like Shuffle we already talked about. That had stuff brought into it from Sun and Moon before it got sort of left out to pasture or whatever. But this is the first one to really debut in there, and that's going to be Pokemon Duel. So this is kind of a weird history. Now, I never played this mobile game when it came out. I was aware of it. And but it is, from my knowledge, is loosely based on something called the Pokemon Trading Figure Game, which was something they tried to make in like the late 2000s, early 2010s. I forget exactly where it was. That also didn't make a huge splash either. But this game does have its fans, and we'll certainly be checking out both its music and, to the extent we can, its gameplay. And was this something? I assume this kind of fell off your radar as well until this it came up here, huh?
Yeah, we're hitting the point where the world is large and there are many apps and many games. So yeah, this kind of blew past, but I am excited and getting to learn about it, and I'm sure someone has a Let's Play going on.
No, there should definitely be some nice archive footage we can take a look at. But until then, Anne, thank you very much for being on.
Thank you.
This has been Stephen Reich. All right, folks, thanks. All right, Anne, did you want to take a quick couple-minute break? I want to grab some water and be right back here.
Okay, we will be back. How's everybody doing in the chat? We having a good Saturday? Not very good at vamping. What should I talk about? But yeah, like, I don't know, more and more, like, especially after seeing, like, redoing movie 7, I am like, why were we all so mad at Tobias that he showed up with a team of legendaries? Like, my goodness, like, where do you, because it makes sense in our world of card games and video games, like, okay, Nintendo said this is a legendary, so it has higher stats, you can't use it in the tournament, but in the anime world, the Pokemon are just there, like what's the distinction? Are we gonna start banning Clefairy because they're straight up aliens? Like, what makes them different from Deoxys or LGM? Like,
I was gonna say.
Mewtwo?
All right. Well, so we're going to go straight into our game discussion. There's a fair bit to talk about here in terms of not so much new mechanics. There weren't maybe a ton. There were some definite gameplay tweaks, I can tell you that much. But some definite historical things to talk about here. It'll make sense when we get to it. So I'll leave a little pause, and we will do our game discussion. All right, well, tons to cover. We could never get to all the songs we would want to in our music discussion, but now it's time for a game discussion, and we'll try to be as comprehensive as possible in the time we have. So as far as mechanical changes, now, there isn't I don't think there's a true major change like there was with the final smashes in Brawl. Those continue to be a part of the game if you have those on. But sort of from a overall perspective, they did speed things up. Brawl was intended to be a little bit slower. And there also were some technical things. Because this was a dual release between the 3DS and the Wii U, they had to, famously, they cut the ice climbers because they couldn't get a way to have 2 models per player in there. They also had to split Sheik and Zelda into separate characters. And Pokemon Trainers similarly got, narrowed down to, just Charizard, I think is how they worked it out this time.
As Charizard would want.
Well, if you're going to pick one of those 3, remember it was Squirtle, Ivysaur, Charizard. I think we know who is the most interesting to most folks. So they had to make a fair number of concessions, although having it on the 3DS on the go was a neat experience. Obviously, we kind of take that for granted with Ultimate being on the Switch, and you can take that pretty much anywhere. So, that's just a kind of a given now. But this was kind of a new thing back then because they did not make one on the DS. So some of the stuff, I guess, new-wise is under the hood. Any comments on any of the things I brought up there, Anne?
Well, biggest difference that I remember, I think this is the one where you can start with that let you have 8 players on the screen at one time, and if I'm remembering this right, and that was wild. that is a party and a half.
Yeah, the Wii U version allows you to have up to 8 players on certain maps like Hyrule Temple, and they made a special version of Battlefield, and some of the other large stages can have 8 people playing at the same time. So, and speaking of characters, there's the usual slate of new characters. First off, on the Pokemon front, we get a new character, Greninja, since X and Y was the new thing there. I think that going back to the music just for a moment, I think that may have been why there wasn't as much. There was a lot of music directly from X and Y because that had released like only a year or so before for this game, so they didn't have as much lead time. But in any case, Greninja, I mean, it's got pretty much all the moves you'd kind of expect there based on its moves that it can use in the game. Water Shuriken, stuff like that is all in there. I don't know how competitive it was there. I think it still gets some play in Ultimate, but I couldn't tell you how much. Not a bad character, but not one I gravitated towards. What about you, Anne?
I don't think I've ever chosen a Pokemon character that wasn't Pikachu. So, yeah, I definitely didn't do Greninja. No, wait, I've done Charizard. I've done Charizard before.
Well, one of the other major additions, it could have theoretically, I suppose, have been done on Brawl, but they've added the Mii fighters. There's the Gunner,
Yes.
there's the Sword Fighter, and the Brawler. So 3 different character archetypes that you can use your Mii on, and you can even equip them with various things, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of funny there. I had a nice Waldo, as in Where's Waldo Mii that
I love it.
gave him a spiny shell hat and to look like his bobble hat in there. So not something I experimented a ton with, but certainly something notable in there.
Yeah, they also they brought Mewtwo back, and they got Sora from Kingdom Hearts that I still can't afford, but
Sora's Ultimate. Sora's Ultimate.
Oh, Sora's Ultimate. I'm so sorry. I'm looking at the wrong one.
Yes, you are. I know it's easy to get this and Ultimate confused because,
Yeah.
well, there are some major differences. They do quite follow, especially the Wii U to the Switch version. But as far as like third-party characters, now we didn't get Snake back, although we did in Ultimate. But in this one, we got Pac-Man, Mega Man, and eventually with DLC, we got folks like Cloud and a couple others, which was always fun. And the Mega Man stuff, unfortunately, I kind of wish we had more non-Pokemon selections because there is a decent amount of Mega Man remix music in this one. I guess the other one we probably mentioned earlier is Ryu from Street Fighter is also in there, and that also brings a lot of that music as well as a couple of remixes in there. So pretty nice with all that. I remember going back to that event at Best Buy. We hadn't seen many of the Final Smashes and stuff like that. So when the Mega Man Final Smash of having all the different versions of Mega Man, like X and whatnot, in the line there come together for his final smash. That was a real cheer moment for the crowd because we hadn't seen that yet, which was very, very interesting. So good stuff there. As far as the DLC, yeah, you finally got some DLC. I know that Mewtwo, I think you could just get from having both versions, and there was even like a feature like where you could use the 3DS or the 2DS was out by this point as well. As a controller for the Wii U version. So they had that kind of level of connectivity as well, which is
very cool.
Really very interesting to say the least. So, yeah, that was something. So having that feature in there. But getting Mewtwo back was pretty cool that they managed to do that. I think actually one of the early when they put Greninja, when they announced Greninja, they did a little bit of tease that made it look like Mewtwo was coming back with the Aura Sphere thing, but no, this is something, or the Shadow Ball thing, but this is apparent, but it was something different. That was a real kind of troll from Sakurai and his team and Nintendo. All right, well, one thing we absolutely have to talk about here is, I don't know if this was the absolute first game to use them, but it was right near when they debuted, and boy, were they a hit. Amiibo. I'm sure they still make these, obviously, a few a year usually for Nintendo. They've obviously cut down as Toys to Life is not nearly as big a thing as it was back then. This was during the Skylanders and Disney Infinity and all that stuff craze of the 2010s. And Nintendo did their own spin on it with Amiibo, and those things were crazy popular. First of all, they made sure all the Smash Brothers characters, but I don't know, 6 or 8 of them. I forget how many. I have a couple Yoshi ones. I have a regular Yoshi one, and I have a Woolly World a Yarn Yoshi. And I know I have a Jigglypuff, a Mewtwo, a Pikachu, and maybe a couple others. I don't know. This was part of what, obviously, the Wii U was a big money pit, money loser for Nintendo. So this is one way they sort of clawed their way back to profitability. And what did you sort of think of the whole Amiibo thing, which, like I said, is still going around?
Well, I did not actually own my own Wii U, and they were kind of at their height. So I never bought one for myself. When I moved in with the one roommate who had a Wii U, she had a few, but I honestly don't understand what they do. So I've always seen a bunch of them in stores, and they're very cute, and I know they connect to things, but I don't understand what that means.
Well, as far as Smash 4, what they do, and you, by the way, you had the reader on the Wii U gamepad. There was also an adapter for the 3DS, and eventually, like, the new Nintendo 3DS has a scanner for Amiibo built right in. Excuse me, but in Smash Brothers, you could use them for a couple purposes. One of those was to sort of train it as like a CPU fighter type deal, and there were, I think, a couple other things. Other games have used it for different stuff to unlock bonus features. Like I remember the Bowser's Fury add-on to Mario 3D World when they brought that to the Switch. The Bowser amiibo allows you to spawn the Shadow Bowser or whatever it is in the game whenever you want. Wow. But so it's a little different each time. Like I said, Nintendo, even themselves, they still make these and they still sell decently. But they are still around. We'll talk at some point. At some point, I want to do an episode on games other than Smash Brothers that have Pokemon music in them, and eventually we're going to talk about Super Mario Maker, which was another big user of Amiibo for its block system in there. So we may talk about it then, but certainly, I mean, let's see, not long ago they had their own alarm clock called Alarmo, but it was it still, I guess, is a thing that they do and they put out there. Not as intrinsic. We don't know with the Switch 2 where it's going to figure in there. There might be some support for legacy titles, but we'll see what happens with that. But I definitely want to mention it. Now, I guess I should say that, let's see, as far as like single player modes, like there is a classic mode, there's an all-star mode, there's a single / multiplayer mode called Smash Tour, which is sort of a board game, sort of Mario Party, but with Smash mechanics and fights and stuff like that. What do you sort of think of this game content-wise?
Well, like, I have never been disappointed. Like, again, I don't think this is one that I owned myself, so I've not played through the whole story, so I can't comment on that. But like the actual battling each other, like I've never been disappointed. All I want is to beat up my brothers and sisters with fun characters. I did like that there was like an option of like the for fun and for glory kind of. So like kind of take it down and let it be a more casual game versus like we actually know what we're doing and we're going, and we're like we can make a lot of very specific requests of how we want to set things up. Yeah,
balancing those audiences is sort of a big deal there. And, I mean, I know the competitive scene liked specifically the Wii U version. I don't know if there was that much competitively on the 3DS version. I'm sure there was some, especially before the Wii U version came out. But, they wanted faster action. They definitely wanted no tripping. So they got what they wanted there. But there's still, like I said, the vast majority of people who buy this game, play it as sort of a fun thing and a way to, and just for the lulls and stuff like that of having all these characters from different franchises work together. So Smash 2 are definitely not something that the competitive scene cared about. And I think there was a sort of, not quite the same thing, but sort of a filling the same gap mode in the 3DS one. So they did try some experiments and stuff like that. I guess the other thing, one thing that keeps popping into my head for some reason, and we'll talk about it a lot more when we get to Smash Ultimate in a year or two, is that this is the last game with trophies. And because in Ultimate, they switched to what are called spirits, which are basically just still images versus 3D models of all the different things in there. And sort of the part of the reason for that is that it's taking so much time to make models for stuff that doesn't even really do all that much. And spirits take up a different spot in the next game in Ultimate, which we'll talk about, because there's some definitely interesting things there. But yeah, so I guess this is the last time we've seen trophies, and it may be the last time for that. But I don't know. There's just so much to do in these games. I should probably take a quick look in there and see, but I'm pretty happy with Ultimate, and like I said, we will get to that. Any other closing thoughts, Anne?
No, it's a fun game.
Absolutely. All right, well that should cover that. Like I said,
wasted many an hour on Super Smash.
Got a lot of questions there from DDO33 that unfortunately we weren't able to work in there. Ultra
Beasts
are
I
also
don't have
from
my chat. Right? Yes, Ultra Beasts.
Yeah. Well, I don't
People
know if
take it
more
to the Pokemon League for crying out loud. Nobody said anything.
Yeah. So I don't know. So they have some interesting ideas. Like I said, I'm sure we'll see. I'm guessing we'll see more on ZA in a little over a month when Pokemon Day comes around. I'm really hoping they have, like I said, we know some things about the development of that, and that it theoretically, at least at one point, was planned to come out a little bit earlier. But hopefully they put at least some sort of pre-tease in there, like the starters or the professor or professor equivalent for that region, for that game, so on and so forth. But yeah. So let's see. Yeah, switch to. I don't know. Like I said, we don't know much about it. We still don't know a whole lot more than we did before. I think Nintendo had to put out that little trailer for the Switch 2 just because so much was coming out there. They had to say, yes, we're aware of this. I mean, it's not like 8 years ago when they were releasing the original Switch where the Wii U was gone and whatever. But all right, yeah, I still have plenty of Amiibo. I don't think I've bought any for a while because I haven't had a strong desire to do that. But yeah, that's how Nintendo, closed the gap on their income for a couple years during the Wii U generation. Was a couple. I forget how many they made there, but especially for this first wave with Smash Brothers and some of the other games, super popular. So Nintendo has generally been. Have been, let's see. Oh, I forgot what I was saying. Something about Amiibo, but in any case, yeah. So we'll see. I mean, Nintendo merch has always been. I think of the three major game, companies: Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo's been the biggest merch, brand there. Gordy,
Okay.
yeah. Sorry, we kind of wrapped up our discussion already. But if you have anything you want to tell us about. Your favorite Smash 4 songs. Like I said, I have used a ton of those. Another one, Jogging/Countdown. This is the first game with Little Mac in it, which you think would have happened earlier, but I guess, finally having the Wii game out there, the remake was a big deal. Let's see. So they like to pull deep, and obviously Kid Icarus is back. Especially with Kid Icarus Uprising being a thing. That character and a Sakurai thing at that. So
Kid Icarus is my go-to, so long may he live.
Yeah, so yeah, they also split up. Samus in Brawl is actually two different characters. You can swap with the Smash Ball. You can swap between Samus and Zero Suit Samus, and so on and so forth. And they split them up this time. I guess they had to do the same with some of the other alts. Let's see, is this the one where they added the Bowser Jr. and the Koopa Kids to this one, right? I think so. The Koopalings, I think, is this one.
I think
So a lot of fun stuff in there. And like I said, Ultimate, well, when we talk about, let's see, I think the only new Pokemon character there is Incineroar in Ultimate. But but my goodness, the character roster is immense. Anything else there? Otherwise, we're going to kind of wrap up our live stream.
Sorry, I'm being distracted by the chat.
Apparently. Yeah.
Sorry.
But yeah, so like I said, next episode, next discussion, hopefully sometime next month, will be will be Pokemon Duel, the mobile game, the defunct mobile game that neither of us really tried much while it was there. But I still have kind of I don't know. But thank you everyone for coming in here. Like I said, as far as stuff coming up here, right now I'm working through. Anne just sent me some more audio from our next, let's see, podcast episode should be Shuffle. And I need to send her some stuff from our concierge discussion. We go back and forth on all this. But thank you very much to everyone for showing up there. All right. Thanks.
Bye.